So welcome everybody. My name is Kerry Anderson, for those of you that don't know me, and a special welcome to our online viewers here tonight. I'd like to start by thanking Clear Dynamics for making this beautiful space available to us again. How cool is this in the old Beehive building? This is where technology is happening here in Central Victoria, so you're getting an insight into an industry that we don't normally get to see. I'd also like to thank Launch Vic and our local government agencies across the Loddon Campaspe who are supporting this program, and we're very excited with the Pre-Accelerator program and events like this. We couldn't do it without them. So before we kick off, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the traditional owners of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. And some of you online might be in Yorta Yorta land, or it could be Tangarung country, even further, the joys of technology. So we do acknowledge that wherever we are. So why are we holding this event? Startup Centre Victoria has two aims. One is to inspire and support startups, which is what Jarrod and Stef are going to have a bit of a talk about tonight. But it's also to build a stronger collaborative ecosystem. And I know some of you in the audience, online and here today, are mentors or presenters who volunteer their time, because we get it. We need to help startups and build, because everyone else's success is also our success. We're stronger together. So that's our philosophy. Tonight's topic, it's not one I would have thought of straight away, but AI and startups is very, very important. And we're here to learn. But along with that is a lovely backstory of Jarrod Robinson. And Jarrod and I go back a little way. I reckon about a decade ago, I met Jarrod as a young outdoor or PE teacher. And the PE geek, he was known as then. And I've watched his journey as ConnectedPE got started and took off globally. And it's just an amazing story that has happened right here in this region. So it's very inspiring to me. But along the way, he's gathered a lot of information, and it's Stef's job to prize that key information out of him tonight. So I won't steal too much of Jarrod's thunder, because he's going to share a bit of his story as he speaks tonight. But I will introduce Stef. She's co-convener of the Bendigo Developer Meetup and works in the industry as a director of engineering. So you don't build bridges, do you, Stef? No, it's a different type of engineering. Previously with Clear Dynamics, so she knows this space here well, and currently with Culture Amp. She's also working with a team, and I know the team members are here tonight, on a startup platform, Astra Tasks. Did I get that right?
Nailed it.
Astra Tasks. Watch that name. Watch this space. It could be going great places. So this is a conversation that Stef is living and breathing at the moment. So that's why she's going to wrangle every bit of information out of Jarrod that she can. So I'm going to hand over now to Stef and Jarrod to continue the conversation. And just a reminder, you might want to turn your phones off too. Thank you.
So we heard a little bit of an introduction from Kerry just then, Jarrod, about your story, why you're up here tonight. Do you want to tell us a little bit more how you started ConnectedPE and why maybe Kerry wrangled you in here for an AI startup conversation?
Well, I'm still yet to work that out.
The politically correct answer to that one, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much an accidental entrepreneur, and I think some others might resonate with that. You kind of stumble into different opportunities along your journey. And for me, it all started in the classroom, really, in 2007 in the town of Boort. Does anyone know Boort? I didn't know Boort before I started there. That's how kind of remote it seemed to me. And I had a PE load, and I just enjoyed using technology to help the students learn. Mm-hmm. And as part of that process, I was blogging about, what they were doing, and I happened to get a comment from someone in like week 1 or week 2, and it said, "This is the truest and most brilliant thing I've ever read." Flash forward 6 months later, it turns out that was a spam post. That wasn't real, but it gave me 6 months worth of motivation to keep typing away. And eventually we actually got a real audience of people. Mum, if she counts, she was in there.
100%.
Yeah.
First true fan.
I've read your first blogger, Jarrod. No, Mum, it's a blog. Eventually it got to a stage where I could say that, I had 100 true fans. And for whatever reason, they found the the things that we were doing exciting and interesting, and it eventually led me down the path of, well, what might they buy from me, and that was an audio, like an ebook kind of compilation. And I made my first, $500 from this ebook, which is mind-blowing to, a 22 kind of year old at the time, 23, that people would pay someone on the internet to read some material. And it set off like that Cambrian explosion, really, of, well, what could I build next? And we built some rubbish along the journey too, like things that were not related to PE or, the domain that I kind of knew. But we eventually got to where we are now, which is we have a suite of apps and tools that PE teachers around the globe use for things like lesson planning, right through to running their sports carnivals, and everywhere in between. And I guess our main product is probably Netflix for PE teachers. Sounds great, doesn't it? For a PE teacher, it's awesome, but for everyone else, it's probably not. But yeah, it's like a turnkey professional development platform for PE teachers, and it just works from Bendigo. And we've been pretty fortunate.
So playing that back a little bit, the first thing you did was find your voice, and
For
through
sure.
finding your voice, you found your audience. And you've been trying to serve them through many different means ever since.
Oh yeah, we made T-shirts at one point. We even orchestrated a person in Romania to create a musical album. And it was gonna be PE music and sell a CD to PE teachers, and we never sold that. But we had a whole composer and all sorts of things. That was a failed idea, and I think they're very important parts of the story. But it really is. It was like, how can you find something that you would talk about anyway, that you would be happy to work on, even if there was never any maybe prospect of it being some payment for it. And for me, at least, that was not the outset goal. And eventually it kind of, hang on, people are paying for this stuff, and it led down to some more obvious choices.
So now you said you've got a whole suite of apps. So that leads to the continuing to leverage technology and Romanian composers.
Well, they got sacked.
So tell us about your technology stack and how
Sure.
you're using technology to help you run your startup out of regional Victoria.
Yeah, well, it was in Boort for the first kind of 5-6 years of its existence.
And we have internet in Boort.
Just.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, I guess I've ridden the 3 waves of kind of tech startup, the opportunities. So the first big wave I think of is the internet, and there wouldn't be anyone in this room and listening that isn't leveraging that in their startup somehow, whether it's email and whatnot through to lead generation. It's kind of pretty obvious that you would do that now, isn't it?
Yep.
We got lucky with mobile. So that's where, Steve Jobs announced, here's the iPhone and you can build apps. We were right there at that point in time to go, well, what kind of apps would PE teachers want, need and use? And one of the first apps we ever made was in that, remember the beep test?
Yes.
Yeah, we did
Yes, I
that.
remember that.
We did the music beep test, which was music instead of the beeps. And it was a pretty big hit, but we leveraged internet first, we leveraged mobile second, and then these days, the third wave, and you can probably guess where I'm going with this.
Romanian composers.
AI, and really, it's about what are we doing at the moment that leverages what I think is going to be as obvious in retrospect as the internet and as mobile apps, and that is kind of the AI avenue at the moment. Yeah, and building things that leverage leverage that.
So you segued that beautifully. Thank you very much. Do you
Saw
want
where
to
you're going.
take us through a little bit of a journey with how you're leveraging AI right now?
Sure, yeah. Well, I like to think of it as one of the best employees that I currently have on hand. It will never fully replace, some of the team that I have, globally dispersed team.
Mm-hmm.
There's people in my team I've never actually met because they are in the Philippines, they're in the UK, China, and the like. But this particular team is always on hand, and that is the AI, ChatGPT, generative AI type stuff. And it gives me the ability to do things that, as a small business, you might have once had to go and source talent for. Mm-hmm. Everything from copy for an email right through to how do I rephrase this so it doesn't sound like I'm yelling at the person? What's the word, empathy? Mm-hmm. How can I be more empathetic? Please rewrite this thing. Right through to building out new products that sort of sit on top of AI and making possible I always had goals for products that I just could never have done in the small business environment. But with AI, I've kind of been able to make those things come to life. And the obvious example is lesson planning. Having a tool that can do lesson planning, which we do have. And in 3 months, I think we've done 40,000 lesson plans or something for teachers around the globe. So things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so what you've shared a little bit there, which is sort of the application of AI in your product suite, which is the customer facing,
Yep.
It's out in the world, but also in some of the back office, which is helping your productivity and helping you to, like you've got an assistant helping you with the copy of your, like you've got an empathy coach helping you with your copy of your emails.
And it's an empathy coach, but I also say please and thank you because maybe they remember that one day. Mm-hmm. He was really nice to us. That's the way I like to think about it. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's what can we do to get that 5-10% improvement in our own efficiencies? And I believe that there are plenty of applications for most people right now. Just the other day, I was with a friend who's a plumber, and he wants to kind of expand his operations into commercial plumbing or something like that. And he asked the generative AI, like ChatGPT, this question, was able to get, some guidance, not the complete form thing that he would then go and run with, but he was kind of blown away by the fact that he had this co-worker that was kind of always available to him. So I think that's a secret superpower, and people who use AI with themselves will probably outperform people who don't. So that's, for me, the obvious kind of play. And then, building stuff for end users as well.
And so, just playing back a little bit of the different use cases there. On one hand, you've got the large language models with the chat interface. So that's the ChatGPT that everyone is getting a lot of experience in playing with. It sounds like your plumbing friend is expanding into the world of plumbing with that. So that's where you're operating and having a chat conversation with this AI superpower.
Yeah.
So that's quite, you're using that tool quite a lot for your Muse and you're playing back and
Yep.
like.
Yep.
There's other ones where you've got potentially an API interface directly into a large language model or another AI technology, and it sounds like potentially you're leveraging that more on your full tech stack for your products.
For sure.
So have you seen any delineation in how you work with the separation of those two ways you're interfacing with the technology?
So, I mean, my experience and the ideas that we eventually build come from the sorts of things that I'm doing with the large language models.
Yep.
But the lesson planning one just seemed like a no-brainer. Like what sort of solutions would a teacher want, and how could AI benefit them? And that's the question that you could ask your audience. Like what do they really want, and how could AI help them get there faster? Is the core question, I guess. And we built out, and we did it in a weekend because it's so accessible these days. A lesson planning tool that enabled them to plan their lessons. We then spun off a report writing tool don't talk about that one to everyone, but yes.
Coming soon.
It's already there, and when reports were being done, I think there was about 20 or 30,000 student reports made, and then a whole array of other complementary kind of suites of things for teachers, and they're just leveraging these freely accessible tech. This isn't something that's gate kept, which I think is a really important point. It's like any startup can start to feed their data or their customers' input to these models and get, these outputs. And in hindsight, it's reflection in 5-10 years, it's just going to seem like that was the third wave.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've got so many elements there that I do want to continue going through, and I know make sure at the end of this session we will have an option for questions from the audience and questions from online. So don't worry, you'll get your chance to pester Jarrod. But right now it's my turn.
How to find Romanian composers. That's.
Yes, of course. That is the next one. So you mentioned working with data, and that's been something that's been at the forefront of a lot of the conversations people are having around AI. Is how much data should we be providing to it? Where is the privacy and the data concerns? How have you approached that within your startup and the way you're leveraging AI now?
Well, we use obviously the publicly available APIs, and we just make clear what it is that they collect, part of privacy policies and whatnot. If you were running in a business and you needed to be a bit more mindful of those things, then you can run these things offline too. You can do offline LMMs as well. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, I had a friend who writes copy for websites, and that's their business, and they're very threatened by what could potentially happen here with AI. And they wanted to test and use it, and in the end, they decided not against feeding all their data into these language models, because what if it starts to replace me? But I'm like, hang on, isn't all your data already on the internet? Your copy is already on there, so technically they already had access to all this material at a larger kind of synapse. So I think I think there's genuine concerns, but I think some of the stuff might be, just the new, isn't it? There's always some hesitancy there.
Yep, and how to approach that. And I suppose
sure.
You mentioned including it in your privacy.
We do.
For your startup entrepreneurs out there, making sure you're being clear on and upfront around that. But it sounds like you're modifying to that. In terms of then you're obviously leaning in, and it's looking like it's the third big wave.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
For all of our startup or entrepreneurs in the audience, how, if they are scared to lean into that space, if they are not sure how to leverage it, how would you start?
I think just be curious. That's really, I think, the most important trait that anyone can have doing a startup, and not putting yourself in, boxes. It's something I tell myself all the time, and there's no room for ego, period. I think, period. Sometimes there is, but especially as it comes to AI, because, I look at some of the businesses that have preceded what we do, which is train PE teachers, and they hire experts to deliver lesson plan material, and they pay these experts to deliver that material. And what we're seeing is the monetization of what used to be a dedicated expert that might produce that particular thing. What I'm saying there is there's your expertise being monetized. There's no room for ego. Get curious and start to play around with what could be a superpower when paired with your unique kind of skill set and opportunity. And that's kind of the way I see it. It's kind of like Iron Man, like Iron Man with the suit. I'd rather be Iron Man with the suit and the available opportunities than, just Tony Stark without the suit. I hope I got that analogy right there, but that's the way I like to think of it. People just be curious and start to learn and explore these opportunities that are in front of us.
if we're getting to choose, I would be Spider-Man, just for if the option is out there, playing back on a recording at some point. So curiosity and leading your superpower. So at the end of the day, you've got experts there that are using this as a tool as opposed to a fear around full replacement.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and so when we go down there, there are some sticky questions that we've got around there. But it sounds like your approach to that is ride that wave, and because otherwise you'll be left behind.
Well, I just feel like the people who do leverage and use the available tools will probably outperform the people that do not. At the moment, we're all kind of in that same realm of opportunity. You can access them pretty easily with an internet connection, and I believe, and you should question everything, you should question me. That's my logical number one piece of advice. Question all things. But I believe it to be a big level up for the type of outputs that we as a society can produce. And, if, let's say, with AI, we get to lift up I think, education for most things that I think about. But if learning opportunities increase globally because of AI, I think that's a net positive. And I think that would be a result of teachers working in tandem with, not in replace of. So that's a lean-in moment for sure.
So if we follow that along, using AI, leveraging tools that make the report writing or the syllabus creation easier, that gives more time, more energy.
Be personal.
For
to be the stuff that you can't replace with those sorts of tools. So hopefully we get to a stage where there's more of that and less of the type of things that we could definitely automate. And I think we know about what they are in your different roles that you do. There's things that you're like, oh, do we really have to do that? Maybe not. Maybe we get to spend more time on stuff that makes us more human. And ironically, maybe we get to that stage where AI is a liberator of humanity. I'm going to throw that out there as a big opportunity, I think.
One of the things that you've touched on is the democratization of technology that is available through this new wave. It's no longer only engineers who can consider how to use technology at their whim. Engineers being software engineers. Again, don't build bridges, Kerry. So I'd love to hear more and more use cases. I think the most beneficial things that we can get out of these conversations is someone who is a little bit further down the curve than we are. So you've mentioned some use cases. What is your weirdest and wackiest use case where you've been leveraging AI?
Well, I mean, I only target that education space. But one example I had that came to me recently is my daughter is in prep and she's doing readers. I got sick of reading the same story. It just seemed to be the same story every single week and day. And I'm like, how can I challenge her to, take her learning to that next level? So I got ChatGPT and I said, can you please craft a series of stories? And I used her real life as the prompt and said, she's just been to Melbourne to go to the zoo, but I want it to teach phonics, which is what the language, the approach that they're using to teach. And within a couple of seconds, what did we have? We had a personalised phonics story that was teaching her the skills that she was having at school, but tied exclusively to her. She thought it was amazing, but what she was really doing was practicing her phonics. And that, for me, it just seems like personalisation and real-time kind of customization is kind of coming. I didn't want to send a message to the teacher and say, this is what I'm doing, because you don't do that to a teacher. But I'm starting to find it everywhere in my life as a bit of a superpower.
So you can continually augmenting with that.
It's augmenting, it really is. And if there's people in the room and you're collecting data of any type, data is messy. Data is hard to make sense of. Maybe your startup is going to be collecting data on different bits and pieces. Code Interpreter is this new tool that ChatGPT has released where you can literally upload any CSV file from any type of data set and then start to ask it questions. Like literally, it could be rainfall in East Loddon on a 100-year time frame, and you could start to ask any type of question about that data and it could give you the answers. And that's pretty awesome for if you're just a solo founder and you've now got access to this array of potential opportunities and you can build businesses around that. I think that's pretty cool.
One of the fears that come out of using AI, less so in this augmented state, so I'll preface this question with this, around setting it loose into your products or into your customers and having chats with them, is the worry around hallucinations, where it just says complete falsehoods, or where it introduces or really raises up a lot of biases that are built into the data. How are you approaching that?
Well, I think we do training alongside our tool suite. So we don't just build apps. One of our most profitable things is we actually travel the planet and we teach teachers how to use the different tools that we operate. So I think training is pretty important. But I don't like to think of these things as being turnkey anything. They still need a person to look over them with some sort of judgment and their own experiences. And I guess the last thing that we tell people to do is take your 100% lesson that you've generated in 3 minutes and go and teach that, because it literally might be using some falsehoods and because it's generative AI. It literally generates what it thinks would be the most logical next thing to say. So yeah, it's education angle for us.
Yep.
And making it clear. I mean, I'm sure there's people that do it. I'm sure people are printing out the lessons and going and teaching them, but that's not how we try and position them. They're a tool.
So it's about, this was done in 3 minutes. Normally it would take you 3 weeks, take 1 hour.
Please take an hour to go back through this and add your own experiences and try and refine it with a bit of a human touch. And I think that's the part that we try and lean into, that, hopefully we can free you up from some things to focus on the quality. Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a chat around generative AI if I didn't go on to ChatGPT before this and ask it. I just put a prompt in and I said, hey,
this is impressive.
I'm running a discussion about AI and tooling. What are some questions that I should ask? So I got a really well formatted list of 18. I'm gonna treat this as a learn with me as we go through. So one of the things that stood out, we touched on it a little bit, is have you faced any ethical dilemmas or challenges while using the AI tooling? And if so, how did you handle them?
I mean, nothing that's apparent to me that that has caused concern, but just a few people that have built their own moats around the kind of expertise that is threatened by some of these technologies, that have said things like, because we have a big database and we have a big influence, that maybe we're causing people to be using these tools a little bit too early in their practice. And that's where we do the whole education thing and whatnot. But I don't know, some of these people that are a little bit threatened by it have raised, their own concerns. And, my mindset is I like to lean in, I like to think about the positives. And we're literally 6 months into this process. And it's not fully formed yet, but I'm not waiting until 6 years to build these kind of things. I'd rather be there skating to where the puck is going than missing it. And presenting those opportunities for teachers in real time, yeah. So ethically, it's like, should we be talking, getting teachers to upskill in these areas? And I think it's obvious that we should be. But yeah, some people might not agree.
And so playing that through, it's the ethical dilemma of not doing it is larger for you.
I think that's pretty apparent, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to continue forward with my rapid fire AI generated questions here. So one of the things that comes up is AI is and this technology. You said it's a wave. It is 100% a wave.
I think it's bigger than the internet wave. When we look back, it will be the culmination of many of those things compounded.
And so with this technology compounding, improving, adapting, a new model dropping every few days, new open source version of that dropping an hour after. How are you keeping abreast of those changes as they happen and balancing with running business, being, showing up for your family, doing all the things that you want to do in your life as well.
By knowing it's okay to miss everything. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you go and drink from the tap and, you just need to get a little bit of water but everything else kind of keeps flowing past. It's kind of like a metaphor that I use in most things that come my way. It'll just, if it's important, it probably comes back, to me. Because you can get bogged down in all of those, the overwhelming craze of life. And I have not always been like that though. No, I've had moments of ADHD and chasing every conceivable thing. But yeah, being okay with the idea that you're not going to catch everything.
And so this is a startup and AI conversation. So going back through there, not chasing everything in your startup or potentially chasing everything. How do you, with a wide optionality of where you can pivot and grow your business to, how do you learn quickly and adapt based on, you said you adapt to your customers' needs. How are you doing that consistently while staying ahead of the wave?
Well, firstly, everyone grab your right hand and put on your left ear. If you've got a chance to do that. Right hand, left ear. You can do that? Yeah? And just do the following. So left hand to your nose. It's pretty easy, is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah? All right. Now, you'll need a second hand for this. Cross your hands and do what I'm doing right now. Left hand and on nose. And all I want you to do is to uncross and do the opposite. So uncross as fast as you possibly can. As I look through the room, there's people doing like all sorts of, the more things you add, the more crazy it becomes. And you're right, you've got to pick those moments that are a little bit easier to focus on. Ways that you can get there. Try not to add too many things for starters. We added a second part there and it, wasn't so successful. Validate some of these things as soon as you possibly can. That's the biggest lesson I think in startups that I have ever learnt the hard way. Mm-hmm. The hard way.
Lots and lots of
hard way.
The Romanian composer.
The Romanian composer and other bits and pieces. The very first startup I ever made was called Santa to You. And this is sending text messages from Santa to you in 2010. Great idea, but I spent 2 weeks in Christmas sending text messages as Santa to everyone else. So not a great idea in terms of, work commitments and whatnot. But if I had have done some validation beforehand, I might have been able to work these things out. So with
you had some AI.
Correct.
You would have been able to...
Yeah. What am I going to have to do here? Literally, Mum was furious. But I guess with all these amazing opportunities at our disposal, how can you kind of pick the one that's worth targeting? And I think it makes sense to try and validate some of those early thoughts as soon as you possibly can. I've had some conversations with people in the room, maybe in the last little bit, about getting to that process as soon as you possibly can, sooner than you might think. Mm-hmm. And maybe that involves actual sales of the thing that you're thinking you might get to, because that's a pretty good indication of maybe being on the right track. Unfortunately, I haven't always followed that advice though. Again, learnt the hard way.
So given that we've got some pretty early stage startup founders in the room, and getting to validation early, leveraging the AI tools that are now available to us.
Sure.
How would you, starting again, everything you've done previously is now not available to you.
Sure.
How would you start again, leveraging the tools available to you now?
Well, at the heart of it, you still have to solve someone's problems. Mm-hmm. So that remains. That remains the same. You've got a wealth of opportunity to help you research and to help you, drill down into maybe some of the issues that people are facing. But in saying that, you want to test these assumptions. You really, as hard as it might be, you don't want to romanticize your idea. What I mean by that is you don't want to fall so in love with your idea that you miss the obvious signs that this thing just might not work in that particular way in which that you're thinking about it. And that means you might pivot, and if you do it early enough, you kind of can go down paths that, you know, might be adjacent with that particular thing. But yeah, that's what I've learnt through the process of making many mistakes. And these days, the very first thing I do is, you know, ask the audience, as in the people I've managed to assemble. If you haven't got people assembled, maybe you can get in touch with people who are in adjacent fields that would benefit from this thing. And try and test the thinking. You know, would someone pay for this? And will they pay for it? Because saying would is very different to having them actually pay for that particular thing or use the tool, if it's a tool or whatnot. And the sooner you can get to that, I think the better off you can potentially be. And you can avoid some of the pitfalls of going down paths that you shouldn't.
So
like Santa to you.
I was going to say, would you have done the Santa to you?
No, I probably wouldn't have, no. Someone would have said, you'll be sitting there for 2 weeks sending messages, and it wouldn't have been very attractive.
This has been very insightful chat around the way that you've been using it. You've referenced some of your network that have been using it in completely separate industries. Have you seen any use cases where you're like, whoa, I would never have considered using the technology like this?
I mean, I deal with lots of people who are in the same game, really. They're solving problems for people, and they're leveraging the available tools. And I think that's at the heart of what you need to do when you're building a startup. If you're in the room, who is that group of people? Are they a real group of people, or are they just an ideated version of people that you think exist? And finding that out is pretty important, and the sooner you can do that, the better. But yeah, I've got friends who use these tools, AI kind of apps and so on, in health, obviously in education, building recipes, and I don't know, all array of different tools. It's really at the heart of it, solve a problem, use the available tools to make that happen. And the cool part about all those tools is they're practically zero to do, in terms of they cost almost zero to access. And I think that's a pretty awesome time to be an entrepreneur.
It makes it pretty good ROI if the investment is zero.
Yeah. You can test these assumptions pretty easily these days.
So given that AI is just one of the technologies that you're leveraging, I know that was the main premise of the talk today, Kerry, so I don't want to deviate too far away from that. But you run a pretty technology-augmented business. The startup is there. You don't come from a technology background. So how have you approached that? You come from where?
Marupna.
No technology in Marupna.
Well, it's recognising that you probably are the reason why things... I mean, in some ways you're your biggest strength, but you're also your biggest weakness. Mm-hmm. And it's the ego kind of thing again, and there's a tendency, and I've been in that spot, to try and do everything and try and be everything. And as such, if you try and be everything, you're probably no one, or you're probably nothing to people. So I've worked out that the thing that I do best is help teachers with technology. That's not build the technology. I can see how they might use it and how to upskill them in that area. So it's like, all right, if that's my zone of genius and the thing that I do best, better than anyone in the world, it's a bit of a brag, but it's true.
Is that ego?
Yeah. PE, in the PE world, it's true. Who do I need to find that can augment the skills and fill the gaps of the spaces that I don't have? And when I was building ConnectedPE, I didn't have AI to lean on for some of those roles. Mm-hmm. Now, I probably could. Writing copy and bits and pieces, I would lean on. But historically, it's leaning on people who are software devs to bring about solution problem using software. And then over time, I've learned enough to be dangerous, but you wouldn't want me coding, no way.
Not pushing it to production.
No, definitely not.
I hope that was probably motivating for, I know one of the biggest fears that I hear when I'm talking with early startup founders is, I'm not technology driven, I don't understand it, and I'm too scared to touch it. And so what you've sort of said, and hopefully as a takeaway from today, is get curious, get into it. Is there any other advice that you'd give to non-technology driven startup founders?
Well, if you think back 20 years ago, the process to build a website, do you know what that, you would know what that's like. Do you remember Notepad and like bringing out Notepad and writing HTML in your Notepad and trying to spin up a server, and that's all been abstracted away. If you want to build a website now, you can probably go to Wix or Weebly and type a few words in and boom. Actually, you can use AI to build your sites. Literally type in and boom, there's your site. So the pattern I'm kind of talking about here is that most of these technical hurdles that existed have been abstracted away and will continue to be. So what really matters is your idea and the people that you're potentially trying to build that thing for. And it means that, yeah, maybe mum could write, she could be a blogger. She probably could be, and she wouldn't need to know about all the technical stack of how to do it and what to do. All that matters is her particular story. I think that's really liberating.
Tough question though. Would you read your mum's blog? You're on video.
I would tell her, yeah, and I'd leave a comment. This is the truest, the most brilliant. For sure.
I think we will be opening up to questions in just a little bit. But before I let you all have a chance, I do want to have a spicy one. We've touched a little bit on this, how curiosity and leaning into it is the answer. A lot of the fear does come from people going, AI will take my jobs,
Sure.
and that space. What would you say to that narrative, or how would you empower the audience to pivot away from that as a fear?
Well, I don't know the exact stats, but I think we were all farmers at one point.
Yeah, I remember that. I was there.
I think we do, 80% of people, and I did, it came up on TikTok. Don't ever get TikTok, by the way, it's just a rabbit hole, but it was Steve Jobs talking about Telegram, and I don't know what year this would have been, but at one point there was 30,000 Telegram operators in the US, and they knew Morse code, and they had to, I don't even know how it works. I have no idea. I had to actually Google.
Tap here and tap there.
I bought a record player and I had to Google how to use it because I just had no kind of knowledge of how to do it. Anyway, getting beside the point, I have a general forward-leaning approach to many of these things, that a lot of jobs get augmented and new opportunities kind of come out of, the bygone kind of era. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that we get to a stage where things that we could not have conceived become possible. I mean, 20 years ago, it was not possible to run a startup in Bendigo that built apps for PE teachers across the planet. It wasn't possible. Maybe you could build resources, physically print them out and mail them to teachers. That would be the equivalent. But I like to think that the people in the room will be building the next wave of things that we look back on and go, hang on, like that was not possible. And I think that's the way I tend to view the world. That history has shown that we typically find ways to build out new ways to work and operate. And then I also look at, it's a very humbling thing to look at and go, hang on, the Western world has a very different view of maybe the developing world in this space. If you've been in this part of the world and you've had a school that you went to and a teacher that taught you, and then you go to other parts of the world where there's about 2 billion people that have never been to a school, it's obvious to me that AI has a very liberating role for that 2 billion people, and I just get more excited by that sort of stuff than the people in other parts of the world that might be a bit scared by what it means for them. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Question it though. Question all of it.
I love it. Leaning into the net positive. Leaning into the making what was impossible now possible.
We'll look back and be like, that business came about and you couldn't have done that years ago. And I think the obvious trend is that you could be a solo founder and build a business that has global impact. You could build the next unicorn. But you could just be one person leveraging these available tool sets, whereas 20, 30 years ago, to build a unicorn business, you needed 100 people. I think Instagram got it down to 14. When Instagram was sold to Facebook, it was 14 core team members that built the $1 billion business. And what's obviously been happening is it just keeps reducing. I think that's a positive. Lots of solopreneurs. The era of the solopreneur is upon us.
You don't have to talk
You
to
do
anyone
not
but your
need-
AI friend.
No, you do not need a big office with 100 staff. It means that we'll be solving problems in lots of different fields, and I think code will be a big part of that. But I think that's pretty liberating. You can be in Bendigo and have a business that has real impact.
And it's nice here for
It
anyone
is,
dialing in.
yeah.
And to represent for that. I will, pop your hand up if you want to ask a question from the people that are in person here. Kerry will come around and hand you a very ominous microphone.
Someone, please.
If not, I can leverage back to my AI friend, but up the front here. We'll get it. Yep.
I can see the use case for AI in writing stuff. So, you put things on, you ask it to write you a lesson plan, or you ask it to write you a piece about Australia's prime ministers or whatever it might be. I struggle to see where it goes beyond that though, and say, well, okay, so if you I don't know, let's say your startup is delivering food to people, what's the application of AI in something like that? Like what can we apply AI to that's not essentially producing content, if you like?
Yeah, well, if you're delivering food, you probably collect data about the most commonly ordered food and the most common routes and all sorts of data that humans typically struggle to augment and make sense of. And we're kind of getting to the stage now where, and you can do this, you could literally upload your order repository, your order history of your food business and say, give me some insights. And you could get some insights. And it might tell you that all your customers seem to come from the postcode that's choreographed in this particular area. And then you're like, hang on, why is that the case? And you start to articulate a marketing plan around, well, everyone's coming from this area because of this particular reason. So you start to glean, insights from data that might have been missed from the general human glance of your business operations. Or you might have had to bring someone in who specialised in that particular thing, and that's out of the realm of the startup solopreneur founder. So, yeah, data, making sense of data, big use case for sure. And I mean, there's others as well. I think data matches a lot of fields. What do you do actually? Is it food?
No. Think accounting. Yeah.
Counting, numbers.
Oh, yes.
For sure. Yep.
All about AI and that.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely worried for my job.
Well, yeah, you with the Iron Man suit will be a superpower.
So we're very quiet online. I think they're listening intently or they're toasting their crumpets. I'm not sure which.
They're not listening.
Crumpets.
They're going to be watching the transcript. They're going to put it into the AI. Then they're going to get a gleaned amount of 3 dot points to summarise it. That's it.
Possible.
Excellent. I do have a question though, Jarrod. I'm really interested in the startup and the business growth, the scale up. And I can't help but think of you being a PE teacher in Boort, and suddenly what you're doing is going global. What were the keys to get that reach, to get that trust, to get that sales funnel going? How did it work for you, or how would you do it differently next time around?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it, but it is leveraging the available tech. I mean, like I said, you cannot run a PE training business without the internet. So that's kind of essential. But really, at the heart of it, we just happened to solve a problem that was a real pain point. And we didn't build a vitamin, and I think sometimes I've built products as vitamins. And you think about whether your startup is a vitamin, as in it's a nice to have, or whether it's actually a painkiller, and you're solving a real pain for your customer. And this vitamin and painkiller analogy just so happened that we actually built a painkiller. Teachers needed ways to use technology in meaningful kind of scenarios, and we stumbled into that. The Romanian orchestra was probably not even a vitamin. It was
A milkshake? Or?
not great. Someone would have bought a milkshake. So I guess at the heart of it, it's, getting that thing that people really could get some value from. That's a painkiller.
But you still have to market it. You could have the best idea in the world. You've got to get it out there. How did you get it out there?
Well, at the time, we were there at the Twitter, which is now X, by the way. We've seen that news? Yeah. And we built our following on Twitter. So we had to have a channel that we could communicate to people on, and it so happened to be Twitter, and we leveraged those social platforms, and we built free content that attracted people into our funnel, into our world, and eventually got them onto an email list. And then that email list grew to, I think at its peak it was 30,000 or something, and then monetize people's interest from there. But yeah, leverage the internet with a real problem and a solution.
First question, and just detouring completely away from the AI here. You're obviously working as a teacher at the time.
I was.
Salaried employee, and then you've decided to go into running your own business. Now that, and probably at a fairly young age, so probably not a lot of savings behind you. How did you manage that in a practical sense to go, well, still got to earn an income, still got to pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever?
I'm just a degenerate. I don't know. Some of the things that I think of in that particular spot is there's no better time to do it than then. As it gets a bit later on, something becomes harder and whatnot. But for me, it wasn't very obvious. There was a long marry-up time, too long, and it eventually got to the stage where I had to be told by people in the kind of online business space that I was pretty silly to be going to a salaried job. And that was 3 or so years after it had kind of happened. So it wasn't a clean break for me. It was kind of like, what are you doing? You're picking the wrong choices. You're irresponsible going to your job every single day. That's kind of where it got to in the end. But yeah, I mean, they're real things. Yeah, like if you're building a startup and you're doing it on the side, and you've got to balance real world things with your hopes and dreams. And that's why I think it's important to test things fast, fail fast, pivot fast, and not get too caught up on ideas and spending 6 years ideating about this thing one day might be amazing. You want to test it pretty quick. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just breaking in here because we've come alive. I'll read the questions out. Kelly says, fantastic insights, thank you. Michelle asks, other than ChatGPT, what other apps with specific focus are proving useful for you? I've heard about amazing tools to do animation sketches, create videos, etc.
Canva. I mean, that's like if you're building a startup and, it's kind of... You can build a lot of stuff with Canva. Mind Journey? Mid-Journey?
Mid-Journey.
And generative kind of imagery type stuff where you can type in a prompt and get an output of that particular thing as a picture. That stuff's still pretty early though, but in the AI space I tend to play around with mostly ChatGPT and then tools. For me at least, I think it's kind of essential that you need a place to build up a database of your customers or your prospects somehow. Now that could be a piece of paper that's got them in there, but I think there's better ways to do it, whether it's an email list, whether it's some sort of social media platform or whatnot. They're essential kind of ingredients for me. Because at the end of the day, I could lose my social platforms, but I kind of have the email list.
Michelle did clarify AI tools and apps.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, there's people building AI tools on top of ChatGPT that do a whole array of things. So for me, I tend to just go straight to ChatGPT and ask it to do the stuff that I am after. If you want to follow along with what people are doing in that space, there's some pretty good people who just dedicate all their time to looking at the latest AI apps. You could find them on Twitter, but it's kind of like a fire hose of craziness.
I'll put a little plug in here. There is a small startup in Bendigo publishing a bunch of AI-driven productivity tools called AstroTasks. I'm one of the founders in there. You'll see it coming out of the Startup Central Vic pre-accelerator. So watch this space as another tool coming out into the system.
That sounds like an amazing note to end on, unless there's another burning question to ask. You're happy, Mark? That was a great plug. Yeah, obviously marketing. Yeah, got the thumbs up from the team there. Well done. This has been, well, it's an ever-ending conversation, isn't it? And but it's useful to place it in the context of someone that has a startup. The theory is one thing, but the real life is another. And when you've got skin in the game, there's pain points for the founder, even while you're saving a problem for others. So, and it's great to see your journey continuing, Jarrod, and the way it has pivoted from when you physically had a conference in Dubai in person.
Let's do that even online now.
And now it's pivoted to online, so continually adapting. So it's almost like a new startup every second year, isn't it? So
that's the only guarantee. I just try and disrupt myself.
Yeah. And that's a very good word, disruption. Yes, we need to constantly innovate, constantly disrupt, and to remain relevant in such a rapidly changing world. And even though I cringe every time I hear the words, I'm not a tech person. Make that very clear to everyone. I appreciate what it brings to the business world, and you'd be crazy not to take advantage of it. In fact, where even the least technical people are using technology, we see an advantage and we use it in our businesses. We've come a long way. We probably haven't stopped and thought about how far we've come, but there's always further to go if we're brave enough. So I think you've given us confidence to jump in there and have a go. And wonderful questions, even if you did cheat a little bit.
I prefaced that I was getting them from where I was getting them from.
I think that's a great thing. The number of people that are doing that, it's a bit of a running joke. I'll just consult with and put it in. But it's all really interesting. Great conversation once again. I really would like to thank Stef and Jarrod for giving up their time tonight and sharing a bit of their story and their thoughts with us. So thank you, everyone. And of course, our speakers always get rewarded with some regional produce. Now, once again, I think Masson Rangers somehow got into this box, along with a bit of City of Greater Bendigo produce and a bit of Mount Alexander, and we've been enjoying some regional food and beverages this evening because it's all about supporting each other. So thank you, Stef, and thank you, Jarrod.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And just in closing, thank you to our online audience and Chris behind the camera, living it live, always helping us and making everything so smooth. And when we see a mass exodus in the next moment, it's because we have a pre-accelerator program happening around the corner at the Emporium. So they're all going to race out and be inspired even more. But thank you, everyone, for another inspiring event. And stay tuned for more coming your way. Thank you.